Assalamualaikum warahmatullah everyone. Our topic today is about the Pillar 3 disclosure. It is a topic in our risk management for Islamic banking series. And the reason why we need to look at this important topic is because the banking business is a highly leveraged business, meaning that they don't use their own capital fund to make the loan or to make murabaha, but they will use borrowed funds raised through the deposit mobilization, the issuance of current account, saving account, fixed deposit. So these are the deposit products that will mobilize deposit funds, that is borrowed funds supplied by the depositors to the bank. So in a sense that deposits are essentially loans supplied by the depositors to the bank, and this loans is used by the bank to make loans, to make consumer loans, to make business loans, to make personal loan, and all kinds of debts needed to run or to fuel the economic activity. So as we know that in Islamic banking, as well as conventional banking, that meaning that the bank is highly leveraged. The bank uses the deposit fund or the borrowed fund to make the murabaha. The bank do not use their capital fund to make the murabaha. So this highly leveraged business model is adopted by the Islamic bank. And we can see here that when the Islamic bank uses deposit coming from CASA, from Qardu deposit, from Tawarruk deposits, so this deposit will be funding the murabaha, or they will be funding the Tawarruk financing. And we see that in risk management, we can see that this murabaha or Tawarruk are exposed to the danger of loss arising from default, which is credit risk, or loss arising from market volatility, so that is market risk, or losses arising from the weak internal control, that is operational risk. So these three inherent risks, credit, market, and operational, it must be reported to the public, through the Pillar 3 disclosure, so that the public will have an idea what's going on in the banking business. So this Pillar 3 disclosure are a set of reporting requirements for banks and financial institutions to disclose information about their capital and risk exposure. So we can see here that when the bank is exposed to credit, market, and operational risk, any losses arising from this exposure beyond the loss provision would have to be covered by capital. So capital must be available, to support or to absorb any of these unexpected losses arising from this murabaha exposure. And therefore, you can see that in the Pillar 3 disclosure, they are concerned about the capital adequacy or the capital requirement that all banks must fulfill to absorb any of the unexpected losses arising from their exposure. And the Bank of International Settlement also provides some definition. Pillar 3 of the Basel framework lay out a comprehensive set of public disclosure requirements that seek to provide market participation. So these are the depositors, the borrowers, the investors, the regulators, and so on, with sufficient information to assess the bank material risk, which is essentially credit, market, and operational risk. So the three risks need to be reported in the Pillar 3 disclosure, and capital adequacy. So how much capital is needed by the bank to support their existing exposure. So if you look at Maybank Pillar 3 disclosure for 2022 over here, we can see that the total capital of Maybank, the actual capital, is 15.8 billion ringgit, right? and the total capital ratio is 20.07%. So the minimum capital ratio as required by Basel is 10.5%, but we can see that for BMA Islamic, their ratio is much higher than the minimum requirement. So there is a buffer of about 10 or 9%, which is good for the bank. Our main exercise here is to look at the respective RWA representing the three inherent risks required by Basel to be reported, which is credit risk and market risk and operational risk. And we can see here the number is given for credit risk RWA. It is 88.4 billion, and then we minus the RWA absorbed by the investment account of 12 billion. So we are getting about 76.2 billion of credit RWA, and then market RWA is 0.6 billion, 0.603 billion, and then operational RWA is 10.1 billion ringgit. So we have here the total RWA is 87.06 billion. So now we want to calculate the respective capital requirement for each of the risks that need to be reported in the Pillar 3 disclosure, credit, market, and operational. So we can see that the overall formula for the CAR ratio is the minimum capital of 10.5% is equal to the minimum capital here, and divided by the RWA for credit, RWA for market, RWA for operational. And we can see that the actual capital ratio that we can calculate here is actually, so given this table, we can see that the actual capital ratio will be K 15.8 billion divided by the 87.0 billion. That will give us the actual capital ratio of 18.25%. Of course, in this table, it was given as 20.0, but never mind. We just look at the data given in the second table down here, that the total capital Tier 1 and Tier 2 is 15.8 billion divided by total RWA of 87.6. That will give us actual capital ratio of 18.25%, right? Now the minimum capital ratio can easily be calculated based on the 10.5 minimum capital requirement based on Basel III. So 10.5 is equal to K minimum capital divided by the RWA of 87.16, and that would be 87.16 total RWA 87.16, and then the minimum capital would be 10.5% multiplied by 87.16 billion, and we can get the minimum capital of 9.1 billion. So this is the minimum capital requirement, the nominal value. The minimum capital requirement to support the credit risk, market risk, and OR is 9.1 billion. The actual capital requirement, as we know, is 15.8 billion. Right, so the minimum capital requirement is 9.18 because that is based on the 10.5% Basel III ratio. So to calculate the minimum capital for each of the RWA for credit, market, and operational risk over here, then we can simply go ahead and do a very simple calculation. So capital requirement, minimum capital requirement for credit risk is 10.5% multiplied by 76.2 billion of RWA credit after deducting the investment account credit saving, then it is 8 billion. So 8 billion will be the minimum capital requirement for credit risk. For market risk, again, it is a 10%, 10.5% multiplied by 0.6 billion of RWA market risk. So we got a minimum capital of 0.06 billion for market risk. And then for operational risk, we calculate, again, similar method. That is the minimum capital of 10.5% multiplied by the RWA of OR, which is 10.7 billion. So we get 1.12 billion. So all of this 8 billion for credit risk minimum capital requirement, 0.06 billion for market risk minimum capital requirement, and finally 1.12 billion minimum capital for OR risk. So this is how we calculate the minimum capital requirement using the formula that we have looked earlier over here, and for that, and this is how we should go around to understand how much capital is needed to support the business. So of course we can see that credit risk is the dominant risk in the Maybank business. You can see that RWA constitute 88.4 billion, almost 90% of the RWA is coming from credit, because after minusing the credit risk from investment account, you can see that 76.2 billion divided by 87.16 billion. So credit risk it dominate all the risk in the exposure, and we got OR come second. Minimum capital is 1.12 billion, and then market risk is the least supported by capital, because I presume that most of the operation of the Islamic banking is a retail business, and thus less is seen in the market related trading. Okay guys, so this is how we would look into the minimum capital requirement for the respective exposure, credit market, and operational risk. Thank you very much for your time, and I'll come back later on to further elaborate on the issue. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you.